Other than Iraq, three most important enemies to the United States.
We have no important enemies. What we need to do is begin to deal with the rest of the world as equals, and we don't do that. We spend more as a nation on defense than all the rest of the world put together. Who are we afraid of? Who are you afraid of? I mean, it is unbelievable. The military-industrial complex not only controls our government, lock, stock, and barrel, but they control our culture.
Senator Edwards, same question.
Okay, that's enough for you.
The three most...
I hate your fucking guts, but I love you all so much. Sometimes you make me overcome with greed, but you're everything I need.
I got higher education for you, vaccinations for you, and all kinds of experimental medications for you. I got professors and doctors, indoctrinated kids, and media outfits to tell you just how great it is. We concentrated it, now you must depend upon banking institutions integrated with the Pentagon. It's been said we spread malice and greed, but the benefits are limitless. We got everything you need. While you were sleeping, we came and took it all away. Yeah, you can bet the farm on that. You never saw us creeping, and that's how it is gonna stay. That's why they say, that's why they say, that's why they say.
Military-industrial complex.
I hate your fucking guts.
That's what they say.
Just to let everybody know, he's coming back from the Philly Social Forum, which, the Philly Social Forum is an annual convention. It's like the Left Forum in New York. Many activists go there, in Left Forum, people like Chris Hedges, Immortal Technique, Colonel West, Noam Chomsky, even though I'm personally not too supportive of him, but I'm just saying people like him, it's a various places where a lot of intellectuals and many activists go to, is what the Left Forum is, and the Social Forum is very similar, but Left Forum takes place in New York, usually May, June-ish. This year it was in May, and this year, the Philly Social Forum was in late June. It's about months later usually, and Social Forum is a pretty cool thing. Too bad I couldn't go. Kind of wish I was able to go. Mortal Technique was there, and he, believe it or not, I'll personally talk to Mortal Technique and secured the rights to. Well, not the rights, I would say, but he gave us permission to use his music on the show. So that's a good news that soon we'll be using Immortal Technique's music, and that nobody has to call up Immortal Technique and snitch on us. We have the right to use his music.
Hello.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Anyways,
yeah, I'm here.
I was talking about the Social Forum. I was talking about what the Social Forum is and what you're coming back from. Coming back. And I was talking. Mortal Technique is that awesome. Mortal Technique personally gave you permission.
I met both the Rebel Diaz brothers and Immortal Technique, and got to speak with them and take pictures with them. And right now we're in Baltimore, and we're near the spot actually where Freddie Gray was attacked by police. So we're stopping through Baltimore on the way to Florida. The U.S. Social Forum was an incredible experience. The YouTube video is already up, and towards the end of the video, there shows the march, and it shows me in the front holding up the sign for the Poor People's Economic Human Rights Campaign, that was part of the Florida delegation, and it shows me there with the red beret that I had, and up towards the front of the march. And I've been here 3 days now on this trip, and came with several comrades, artists, and they're going to have me write for the People's Tribune, Tribuno del Pueblo in English and Spanish, a special article in Philly about the forum, because they know the writer and I know a lot of the organizers. And it was a historic event. This time around, unlike the Left Forum in New York, which is mostly old white academics, there was several people of color, several poor people. These issues were more spoken out on in the forum, and it was very radical. experience in my life that I'm going to write at length about soon. It's over there, yeah.
Well,
Chris,
that's
are you
good.
there?
And, yeah,
I'm in a van right now, so it's part of me if there's a few interruptions. But yeah, that's what's going on so far.
Well, I can hear a little bit in the background, but it's not terrible.
Okay.
And also, yeah, I know that you're actually
Yeah,
in
there's
the
a box
car.
underneath me.
Or as Chris from Canada would say, Kerr.
That's fine. What's that, Chris?
I'd say as Chris from Canada would say, you're right now in the Kerr going back to Tampa, and you're going to get out of Baltimore.
Which is fine because several of the comrades in the bands had to make phone calls. They don't care. They're very understanding. We're just saying goodbye to one of the comrades and dropping him off in Baltimore. So.
Yes, and there's been, I was talking. I don't know if you missed it, but there's been a lot of stuff besides this distraction on the media, which is pissing me off because I know I'm going to say the most overused meme line that probably everybody that's been on Facebook.
There was minimal media coverage of this forum. In fact, there was more coverage of the left forum. There was representatives of Tel Sur, Russia Today. There might have been some Russia Today people, but hello. Hold on, I'm saying hello to Comrade's cousin from Baltimore. Just a moment.
Well, mute your phone or something so you don't hear the background. But it's ridiculous. It looks this Facebook this week looks like that there's a fight between.
Okay, Chris, what was I just saying? I was talking about minimal media coverage. Yeah, they had some local media, but not as much media as what it was in the left forum. Yeah.
What I want to make, but what's most ridiculous out of all of this is that right now the stupid Confederate flag and the stupid, I'm not gonna say stupid, but I'm gonna say that it's been way overplayed, and that I'm tired of seeing it. It looks, my Facebook feed looks like a war between the Skittles factory and the Confederate Army has broken.
Well, we would have gladly burned the Confederate flag during the march, but it was raining too hard. The rain certainly didn't deter us from marching.
I hope you realize that because
Black Lives Matter, which started here in Baltimore, there was a huge delegation from them at the forum. Although some of them have black separatists, so I don't necessarily agree with, but certainly there's radicals who want to reach out to their white and brown allies within Black Lives Matters, which I think is a very relevant and new movement that's part of the activist community here in the United States, especially since the tragedies in Baltimore and Ferguson, et cetera, and Charleston, of course.
But all that people are talking about right now is that, it's like there's two major things that are going on right now that internationally I think are way more important than this Confederate flag issue because it is something from 150 years ago, number one. Number two, I don't care what somebody flies on their private property, but I agree. The South Carolina Confederate flag.
If every single Confederate flag disappeared from the United States, it changed nothing. You have a point. It's a structural problem, structural racism, classism, sexism, etc. We talk about that at length in the forum. That
every single Nazi flag has disappeared from Germany. However, there's still a big Nazi faction in Germany that has about 5% of the country's support. So I
didn't realize it was that much. But look at Golden Dawn, right? Golden Dawn had their own neo-Nazis in Greece, right? Not just in Germany. Even though Syriza, which is the left party, has taken over in Greece, you still have minority far-right groups that take advantage of the economic crisis going on in Greece in particular. Although Germany's comedy is still strong, I wasn't aware that there are several neo-Nazis there as well.
Not just that. I mean, there's a lot of neo-Nazis. It's a giant faction, and then they have they like branded the Nazis in Germany, like they brand themselves to be like hipsters, like they're the new thing in practically, even though that what they support is a system that's backwards and has super rich and corporations. That's what Nazism was based on. Really, was an elitist system that using
socialist rhetoric to do the exact opposite, right? And unfortunately, other people have misconstrued fascism and socialism, which are exact opposites.
And look, right now there's a fight going on in Greece between the opposition, which there's the pro-EU opposition, then there's also Golden Dawn and Syriza. Syriza is, I hope they stick to their guns because right now they're saying that we will not pay the international bankers back. We are not going to pay back on our debt. We're defaulting.
Well, I have people on the ground in Greece right now that are denying there's going to be a coup. There's rumors spreading around about a coup, trying to start a panic. But I have people, comrades that I know personally on the ground in Greece, and they're denying there's anything like that going on.
Well, you know what that's about. it's you know what this kind of parallels, but this was an actual coup that was going on. But there was a lot of it's media hysteria that the right wingers used in Venezuela. They kept saying Chavez has been deposed, he's resigned, he's done, stuff like that. But he's really, practically just 2 hours away.
You're talking
from the
about
city.
Maduro.
No, I was talking about when Chavez was overthrown.
Oh, back then. Yeah. And actually doing the same thing with Maduro. There's rumors that he's going to step down, that this and that. They always try to spread rumors and divide and put fear into the people.
Yeah, and the thing is that that's what the right.
Rebel Diaz just arrived from Venezuela when they came. By the way, they're another revolutionary rap group, and they were full of energy. Just arrived back from Venezuela. Great guys. I had my Che shirts and my comments on me from Cuba.
Rebel Diaz actually from Venezuela, or they just go there, or what? I don't know.
No, they went there, and I believe they met with members of the government. I wasn't able to talk to them that long, but they were there as socialists to support the Bolivarian Revolution. And just like Immortal Technique, they're revolutionary rappers. And we had our local rapper from St. Pete come up with us. He's in the van with us. We had a big presence representing Florida, several people from Boston, other parts of the country, an international delegation from Montreal that's going to have the World Forum next year. We had people from France. We had people from Ghana, Africa. We had people from all over. And although there was minimal coverage, like I said, we are our own media, right? Actually, I didn't say that. Our social media is essential. And there was a YouTube up that I shared earlier on Facebook. So it's important to get the word out to all the issues that we covered in the forum.
And
this time around there was a lot of street revolutionaries that were just there to march. They didn't want to bother with sitting around and doing workshops and stuff. This time was much different than my experience last year at the Left Forum. These were full of radicals, young people of color. It was a completely different experience.
Well, yeah, it's like that's a good thing that people. It's like you don't want the paper panthers, as they used to say about Black Panthers, that wouldn't go on the streets and do anything. That just sat around and talked, or in workshops. You want them out.
And
on the
I mentioned
streets.
Voice of Rebellion Radio with several people. They said, "Who do you work with?" Because I said I was independent, I'm a student and a worker. But if asked if Pride at, I'd say yes, I'm with Voice of Rebellion Radio, which I'm calling it now. I'm the co-host, and and I told people, Rebel Diaz, for example, I said, "Do you want to come with Voice of Rebellion?" How are they going to say no? I mean, their group's called Rebel, right? So I talked to Immortal Technique to get permission from him to use his intro songs on our program as well. So yeah, I was talking with Immortal Technique when I first arrived. He was at an after party because I missed him at the forum when he spoke and he rapped. Talked about Peru because he's originally from Peru. My father's from, and he's part Black Peruvian. And as a matter of fact, he was family from a town near where my uncle lived. So I got to practice my Spanish with him and talk to him about that. So yeah, I got to meet a few pretty famous activist rappers and artists while I was out here. And we slept in a church, and we had free concerts, free food. Gave donations when I could, and a lot of love, a lot of positivity, a lot of non-judgmental people. I'd never really experienced something like the U.S. Social Forum. It was my first U.S. Social Forum. I've been in Left Forum, other events, Occupy, but it was like the first major march I've been in a long time as well. It was exhilarating. It was worth staying the extra time for the march, and we marched in the rain, but there was like at least a couple hundred of us that were going throughout Philly. The cops, of course, tried to block the roads. We went right through them, and those people in wheelchairs, elderly children. Everybody was united together in the march. It was a historical event.
Oh yeah, so and also one bad thing that's happened though since then. This is like 3 days ago, so this is actually the day you went up to Philly. There was a major event that happened in Congress. People didn't even realize it because everybody. Well, actually, what's today? Today is it was 3 days ago. Okay, so the day, right at the same time that this Supreme Court ruling goes about the gay marriage, which it is.
Yeah, we actually got word of that in the middle of a meeting about the gay marriage. Yeah,
it's a step of progress, I would say, but however, it's a major, major distraction, and I'm annoyed by it. I'm any feeling of good that any justice has been served has been written by nobody. I mean, nobody knows about this Trans-Pacific Partnership, and I am pissed. Look, it's like my blood is boiling right now, just because I saw nobody.
Hold on a second, Chris. I'm going to step outside.
Besides 5 people, like 5 people were talking about it on Facebook, and it's like people, even these truthers, supposed truthers,
stepping on Baltimore ball soil, stretching my legs right now. Go ahead, Chris.
But but these supposed truthers are more worried about the gay marriage. A lot of them against, some of them for. Instead of talking about the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership is a bill presented by. It's in 4 different countries right now: Brunei, United States, Singapore, New Zealand.
We talked about TPP at length in the forum as well. Yeah,
it is terrible. This bill literally says that if you ban a product, and they could sue your country. And the government, like perhaps in Russia, they ban GMOs. They're not part of the TPP, but let's say if they were, they could ban GMOs, have the people be totally in support of the ban of GMOs. The corporation sues, then they would have GMOs back on the shelves, even though most of the people
it's a violation of our sovereignty, and it'd be forcing our people to eat GMO food.
It completely overrides. It overrides democracy or any kind of process of the people. And here's one major thing: shows like ours might be deemed hate speech by the TPP because there's a lot of stuff that
they can shut us down. I mean, WikiLeaks is revealing these secret agreements with TPP, and that's what they're trying to implement.
That's the thing, and that's a bad. See that only in an Orwellian society is truth hate speech. And that's a word that they use as a catch-all phrase. There is legitimate hate speech.
Well, they're not calling the murder of the Charleston massacre a member of a hate group, or that it was a hate crime, or that it was an act of domestic terror. They're saying we don't have enough information. He was a lone gun, this and that. Number one, the first thing I would do as a prosecutor would bring charges against the father for aiding and abetting a terrorist, for giving a gun to a known racist. I also try to find out his affiliations. But it seems like that's all being avoided. They want the lone gun guy,
And let's look at another thing. Okay, even if this guy wasn't, or even if this guy actually was,
he even had a hate manifesto. Explicitly saying what he was planning to do, pretty much.
That doesn't help. They're trying to use the defense. Oh, he might have been mentally ill, but if he was mentally ill and his parents knew about that. That's just as bad as knowing he's a racist.
That's a negligence right there. They didn't give him the help he needed.
And then they gave him a gun. Not only the negligence, it's right out helping a crazy person commit an act of terror. And this is an act of terror. If a Muslim shot one person, anywhere, they probably would say it was an act of terror. But this guy shoots 9 people, including. And he says that this was a targeted hate crime that he'd done. This guy's wearing flags of African countries that were controlled by a white minority, apartheid countries, Rhodesia and South Africa. But yet the media says, "Oh, this guy might be just crazy." It's like this guy was obviously, so racist. And the fact is that this is partially, I think, it's a stir. When something like this happens, I think it's partially the media uses it, and they try to stir up the division of race between the whites and blacks in this country, of the poor, between the poor whites and poor blacks, so that they can.
There's several Latinos in Philly as well, especially in the neighborhood where we were mobilizing during the forum. So there was a unity of people of all different races and the working class. That was a big emphasis this time around. They mentioned, for example, the only presidential candidate to use the words working class was Paul Ryan to attack the working class. Not even Bernie Sanders has talked about the working class in his presidential campaign. He's talked about the middle class. So I didn't see anybody who was in any way, shape, or form sympathetic to Bernie Sanders. Like I said, this forum had a lot of radicals,
Well,
and I mean that in a good sense of the word. They're the ones that can really bring change.
And also another thing that's came up in the last week was that I don't know what to think about this, but I'll just bring it up because it's like I find it a little bit odd that it makes me think that a half black man that's the president can use the N-word on the radio.
But Colonel West can't.
Yeah, it doesn't seem right. It really it's like even if Colonel West wasn't, just the fact that he said it. On the radio. It's not like he said it in private or anything and he got caught. No, he said it. He knew everybody would be listening. Tons of people would be listening.
Well, yeah, the president said on the radio, yeah.
And he even though I know he used it in context, I guess, but it's still, Colonel West used it in context, and he gets, reprimanded, and the CNN lady's looking at him like he's crazy. Like, it's like when he was describing a phenomenon, and the phenomena of these many people.
Oh, by the way, did the intro song of this program, because I wasn't able to get through in the beginning, was it an Immortal Technique song, or are we still using Payday
We
song?
haven't changed it yet. We didn't get enough time to change it.
Well, we'll try to set that up for the next one. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, we might change it next week. But for this week,
I like
it's still one
Golpe
more
de
time.
Estado. It's in Spanish, but I think it's a good Immortal song. And we can translate some of the lyrics for the listeners.
I think we definitely have to have Rich Man's World as one of the two songs we use.
Yeah, that's also a good one. It's a bit lengthy, but yeah.
Well, it was funny. It's like one time I used Rich Man's World as the intro song, and it was like this kind of Christian-y right-wing author. I didn't realize what he was.
What,
really
he said he
about
liked it? He thought he was serious in the lyrics?
Well, no, but all of a sudden he just starts listening. I'm just like, yeah. I felt it was really awkward because I was like, yeah, this. I bet he's a little bit shocked because he's just on there, talk about how rich he is, and he starts using a lot of swear words. I still don't know. I know I'm not technically banned from swearing on this network. Like I can technically use swearing, but I just don't feel comfortable yet. And I'm not like Stable Radio because I think I went too far.
To use what exactly?
Swear on this network. I know I'm not.
Oh yeah, profanity. Right.
I know I'm not I know I'm technically allowed to, and I said that just to keep it to a minimum. But I feel like a little bit uncomfortable. Like on Stable
but
Radio,
it is more of a night audience. I mean, our program starts at 9, so.
Like on Stable Radio, I think I went too far sometimes. Like I'd be calling people, I'd be like, "It's like what in the flying fuck is going on here with this TPP?" That's how I'd be there, but
right.
But here I'm just like, I'll just talk about the TPP, which I am very pissed about it. Like that nobody's talking about it. Nobody knows about what's going on with it.
Well, they're talking about it at events like ours, but like I said, there's been a little coverage,
But there's been no coverage on the TV. And all this coverage has been about on Facebook.
I'm on the radio. I'm on my show. Go ahead, Chris.
All the people are talking about is the gay marriage ruling, and they won't talk about the TPP. I even put up a picture that was like TPP, but it was in rainbow letters, and it was like, "Got your attention now? Look it up. Trans-Pacific Partnership." Like,
yeah, they have to look that up. You're right.
People need. It's like not. My uncle, who's a politician in Colombia, didn't even know what the TPP was. I had to tell him what it was. That's how unknown this is. And it's alarming because this is how secretive it's been. It's not only our media.
Well, like I said, WikiLeaks helped expose that, And there are a lot of outlets that are acknowledging WikiLeaks, and then there's others that are not out of fear because a lot of people that were associated with WikiLeaks were persecuted, most prominently Assange himself, and we don't know when he's going to be able to leave the embassy. Forget the honking in the background. A lot of the drivers in Baltimore apparently are crazy.
RT has been covering the TPP. I give him credit on that. I mean, if people say that RT is not really legitimate and that it's propaganda, even people that are awakened say that. But I say that they cover a lot of stuff that mainstream media would never even dare to cover.
Okay.
Like
By the way, our driver just informed us that the spot where Freddie Gray was attacked is literally right up the street where we are passing by right now.
Yeah. And what's bad is that that's completely dropped out of coverage.
Yeah,
too.
there might be like a memorial or some type of demonstration going on. We're going to pass by pretty soon. I'll let you know. Go ahead, Chris.
I know, but let's talk about we're talking about the 21st century socialism, which I think that I want to think about something that one of the problems with nowadays is a lot of the activists is like we said that a lot of them are clay and they don't have any real ideological formation in their minds, and they're just easily pulled by people that do and they have an agenda. Like
there needs to be a vanguard of free thinkers, Chris. And my third book I'm working on right now is called The Vanguard, and that's essentially those that lead the revolution will be the youth, of course, learning from the older generations. But that minority, that 20% of free thinkers in society, not the clay, not the masses, that they're the ones ultimately. You have to have, I believe, 10% of the population to support a revolution for it to be successful. At least historically, that was the number. Obviously, we see figures as 80% Americans that don't trust the government. I mean, it's almost pointless to as Americans the system is unfair because so many believe that. The point is to inspire the masses, to take them out of their complacency and their fear through activism, through acts like marches, like we've done here at the Forum.
Well, it's like you got to turn. In a way, I say that's one of the things that has to be done with activism is that it's got to be made from something that it has to be done, but you change the attitude of it. You change it to something that's also at the same time fun to do. You make it, you put energy. If you just walk down the street and chant, and stuff, but don't really have any energy to it, it's going to be kind of boring. But if you have musicians and stuff, or like what they would do in Venezuela when they would have a political rally, that they'd be playing music. I know that was not an opposition rally, but like at the ones where they'd be supporting the Bolivian revolution.
Hey, they got their own community. I'm going through a community right now, just to let you know, Chris, it's very poor, and it's very close to where they attacked Freddie Gray, yeah.
And,
it happened in broad daylight, yeah.
What made me think of that song, I wish we could play at least one time. That song that they played during the 2012 Venezuelan rallies, that the one with the Chavez song, where it's like it was made.
You're talking about the protest with the Cubans and the Venezuelan, right? Where here's where I confronted them in Tampa and said, "Viva Chavez, Viva Maduro."
No, there was a song that they play like in the pro-Chavez rallies back in Venezuela. Like they would have it went something like Chavez Llegó, and
But how did you come up with that now? Like, what is that?
Well, I was thinking because it's like that's the kind of, and then everybody would be so energized, people would be dancing at the rallies. It's like that's what the kind of activism got to be. It's got to be you got to inspire the masses.
Chavez campaigned in the rain. We marched in the rain. You're not going to let rain stop you. You think rain would have stopped Che? So, of course, I remember the image now, the contrast on Facebook, where they show Obama with a soldier holding up an umbrella, and they show Chavez in the midst of a campaign in the rain with no umbrella at all, and it says, "Who's the real leader?" And anybody with a little bit of logic can draw their conclusions on that. But I think that when it comes to radicals, rain or shine, through the mud, wherever it takes, they're willing to show the revolutionary conviction. And if we bring that conviction home and that unity home, once we leave the forums, we can go and make a difference in our communities.
Well, yeah, it's it's the energy. It's also you gotta have a willing attitude. The people that are in activism, they can't be stopped by rain, they can't be stopped by snow, they can't be stopped by bad weather. And if that was really to stop you, I don't know how convicted of a activist you are. But and it's like the leader. Talk about Obama. Yeah, I saw that he doesn't even hold his own umbrella. He has the Marine holding the umbrella. Chavez is dancing on the rain. Supposedly,
yeah. He was campaigning, dancing. He had incredible charisma that Maduro can't meet. But we have to try to be fair with Maduro as well. He has a lot of obstacles against him in Venezuela.
Let's also remember that Maduro, literally a little over 30 years ago, was literally just a bus driver. He's literally came from total opposite.
Well, he was head of the bus drivers union, so he had some leadership qualities in the beginning. But yes, he was completely unknown, and he got to meet Chavez in the early days before he became a political prisoner.
At one point, he was just literally a bus driver. And then he became the bus driver union leader, and then later, right. Meets Chavez, and then becomes several different positions, up to the point where he became vice president in the last term, I think. Yeah, last term. Chavez,
he was foreign minister for several years, so he was kind of like, the diplomat who always traveled and represented the Venezuelan revolution, and then finally became vice president.
I think they have Maduro as the foreign minister because, if Chavez went there as the foreign minister, he might have upsetted some people. Maduro is a little bit more, diplomatic. What I'm saying? Chavez would probably be like, ¿Qué es estos estúpidos está diciendo?
Right. Well, when Maduro kicked the UN ambassador out of Venezuela, he just said, "Fuera." That's it. That you're out. But Chavez, yes, you're right. He was a little more explicit about it. He said, "Váyanse al carajo sin veces Yankees de mierda." That means go to hell, you effing Yankees 1,000 times over. So, yeah, he was a little more explicit than Maduro. But I think that was necessary at the time with all the plots they were fomenting against Venezuela.
Yeah, it was definitely necessary. This is
internationalism is what brings us to where we are today in the United States. Perfect example. There was this French man who was part of the World Forum who was like an observer of our events, of our workshops or whatnot. And he kept asking again and again and again, what happened to Occupy, what happened to Occupy? And started getting frustrated, because like it was hard for him to understand that, number one, half of us in the room were former occupiers, So it's like there's no occupiers anymore. But yes, the movement's, not what it used to be. But finally I just told him, sir, they sent Spaniards and Egyptians to New York to train occupiers. This movement was going on before it even reached the United States. It started with the Arab Spring in North Africa and the Middle East. It spread to Greece and Spain, and then finally it went to New York. So this wasn't just some spontaneous movement that came and went from the United States. It was influenced from events from abroad, and internationalists understand that. Internationalism is the essence of radicalism, political radicalism that we witnessed from the Forum in Philly, where the Declaration of Independence was written, which was an anti-imperialist document if you look at it. And anti-imperialism, offering the alternative society, pro-socialism, they work hand in hand.
Well, but the Arab Spring wasn't all good. I mean, that context, you make it sound like it was a all-around great movement. There was aspects, there was countries where it was beneficial, and there was countries where it was, manipulated by the United States government, and most notably Libya, where they used the Arab Spring protest to overthrow Gaddafi.
No, I never called Libya Arab Spring. That's bullshit. No, it was never at any point Arab Spring. You had a splinter group in Benghazi supported by the CIA that sabotaged the popular government.
And not only that, I mean, Syria is considered Arab Spring. They consider Syria and Libya, even though that I wouldn't say that's a part of, that was a more legitimate protest.
I'll say this. I believe Gaddafi was more popular than Assad was in Syria when the protests were started in Syria. And I think some of the protests in Syria were legitimate in the beginning, maybe minimally in Benghazi as well. But, they were infiltrated by armed groups trained by Mossad and the CIA. So, of course, Syria is not Arab Spring at this point.
And neither did Egypt. Egypt was soured because Morsi eventually.
Well, those who toppled Mubarak are my comrades. I'm not going to insult them and say they were trained by the CIA or Mossad. That's ridiculous. Although, like I said, any movement gets infiltrated, And obviously the Muslim Brotherhood wasn't the ideal candidate. And obviously Sisi's taken over in many ways even worse than Mubarak. I mean, I was meeting with people that are comrades of mine in Philly that had their arm broken on orders from Sisi in Egypt for trying to reach Gaza. People of Jewish descent. On orders from Israel, Sisi had their arms broken on the airplane when they had deported for trying to reach Gaza. So that's what people I'm talking about with their conviction against Zionism.
Oh, yeah. Well, if Sisi ever gets toppled in Egypt, he can go run to be the governor of Mississippi or something. Because remember, he's married to his own first cousin.
Well, actually, in Florida and several southern states, it's legal to marry your first cousin.
Yeah, it's illegal. That's actually that is very that's why I said I didn't have much of a big problem with the gay marriage being allowed, because I'm like thinking, well, if you're really so against gay marriage, why aren't you protesting against incestual first cousin marriage? That's actually wrong. I mean, that could actually result in kids that have problems. But it's like you see an obvious hypocrisy. That's why but in my opinion, I think it's a non-issue in my opinion, because I don't care what people do in their personal lives.
Well, look, it's child abuse. It really is, and it's the laws of nature. It's not even a question of human laws. Like God or whatever you want to call the entity that made us. Made it where the chances for a deformed child that's going to suffer for the rest of their lives is more high from marrying your first cousin or your sibling. Now, second cousin is a whole other thing. Okay. Second cousin is a whole other thing. But first cousins, I mean, that's child abuse. That shouldn't be legal. Now, the excuse is that because back in the day when they first formed these laws, because it's very hard to change a law in states like Florida, you know that, right, with the marijuana law, that 58%, I mean, God, you entire 60% for it to get passed, by 2% margin to get passed the medicinal. But the excuse is that, it used to be when you were on the farm that you couldn't leave town to look for a wife, so make it easier to marry your cousin. But you know what? That was 100 years ago. Times have changed, and I don't think it's right to marry your first cousin.
Yeah, and also, that was 100 years ago, and plus, talk about. I also want to talk about another thing, is that this medical marijuana. Yeah, 58% voted. That was more than what people voted for. This horrible governor that we have here in Florida. I mean, I'm not saying every governor in the United States sucks, but Rick Scott. I mean, this guy literally stole from old people and through Medicare fraud. This guy is a total crook, and he barely won. medical marijuana had a lot bigger margin of a victory, but because of the 60% rule, it didn't get passed. And this is
Colorado recreationally was passed on less than 60% margin, right? I mean, out of the 50 states, I doubt you can find a single one except for Florida that makes it up to 60%.
And the thing is, this is medical marijuana, not even told like California where you can get it for, it's like, I got headaches or whatever. No, this is for people that absolutely needed it, cancer patients, people that had, serious debilitating, or paralyzed and stuff. But no, they said that won't be allowed. It's really it's screwed up, and what should be done at this point really is that everybody should demand that every state has at least medical marijuana. I believe that the whole country be legalized. I mean, we have really. You'd be surprised by the countries that have already legalized it, like countries that and the countries that. Of course, the countries that stay behind and do not go towards legalization or have even stricter policies in the United States are U.S. allies. In Saudi Arabia, they actually behead people over marijuana offenses. And, of course, the United States is very closely allied with Saudi Arabia, which, it's one.
I don't get it. If Obama wants to advocate all of a sudden for gay rights, and remember, he was for civil unions up until recently. He didn't want gay marriage. If he was such an advocate for that, then why is he supporting Saudi Arabia, where at the mere suggestion of a homosexual nature, you get your hands cut off? I mean, and the answer to that's obvious: oil, and also strategic reasons. I mean, the United States supports heavily Israel and Saudi Arabia, and Israel, Saudi Arabia. They're unofficial allies. They're supposed to be enemies, right, in the public realm, but in the private realm, they're allies. They're both very fearful of Iran. The Israelis wouldn't even mind if the Saudis probably had nuclear weapons because they know they wouldn't point it at Israel. So we know this from documents. If not through WikiLeaks, through Snowden. I believe through Snowden this time around. The Saudi documents that came out recently, I haven't got a chance to go over them. But we know that there's been communication between the Saudis and the Israelis. Another example of that is the neutron bomb. And now this plane, number one, Saudi does not have access to neutron bombs. Number two, this Saudi-marked plane that shot down the neutron bomb, I'm willing to guarantee that the pilot was an Israeli. And, of course, they had cooperation logistically with Saudi Arabia, with the United States probably, to go into Yemen and bomb civilians, to kill other Arabs.
Well,
and at that point I said that's treason. Every Arab that supports the intervention in Yemen is a traitor.
Well, the House of Saud, I wouldn't consider them even Arabic. I mean, actually, their genetic, not only just by, symbolically, their genetic roots are questionable. Actually, I'm not saying it's like, of course, of course that what they actually are, doesn't really matter compared to what the crimes they're doing. But I'm just saying is that they're not even Arabic. They kind of keep it secret, but apparently
you told me it's Arab and staying with it.
They're actually part Jewish according to their bloodline, the House of Saud. So it's actually they're only sort of Arabic, but that doesn't even become a factor because the people, the Zionists who claim they use Judaism as a shield. They're not even practicing Jews. A lot of them. And the people that started it weren't practicing Jews. They were just ethnically Jews, and they believed that their bloodline was superior, like a certain somebody, which actually they have a lot of connections to that certain somebody. But we're not going to dive too much into that. We've already dived into that.
Well, I don't want to go into the history so much. Topic of the today's show, socialism, right? 21st century socialism.
Yeah. So I wanted to, I want to talk about since we're talking about 21st century socialism, I want to talk about. Because I want to talk about South America. It's really just it's a story that inspires activists to think like me and Al, because we both have roots back to South America, and we saw Al actually lived through the changes, even though he was in the United States looking outside. I kind of saw the last part of the changes because I was very young when they were happening. In fact, I was born the same year it really all started in '98 when Chavez was elected. He was elected just a few months after I was born. And he was a president all the way up till I was 15 of Venezuela, and then when I was 15, that's when he passed away. But it's just amazing to see how everything changed there. Talking about back in the 60s and 70s, I just remember a speech by Che where he's talking about all these fascist governments in South America and what they've done, and how they're criticizing Cuba about Castro and him, but what they've done to their own citizens. And I'm like thinking, wait a minute, that country now socialist, and that one's socialist, and that other country's socialist. They're talking about Nicaragua, which had a fascist government in the 60s. He's talking about Venezuela, obviously different nowadays. Wasn't technically a dictatorship in the 60s, but was a democracy, so-called. But it was really two parties that were aligned with each other practically. I mean, it was like the United States. They both were two heads of the same animal. These two parties that were in Venezuela. But to see these changes, and I can't wait to actually go into the country where it all started. And I'll admit I'm heading.
Yeah, and it's fitting that it was Venezuela because that's where Bolivar was from, and he started the initial movement against imperialism. Only it was from the Spanish crown at that time. But Bolivar was a visionary, and he saw the potential American imperialism, the threat on that as well as Jose Marti. When he was fighting for Cuban independence.
Well, he had to have, even though at that time, it was kind of funny because it was the Monroe Doctrine. Actually, the United States had technically taken a very strong anti-imperialist stance, with President Monroe signing that if any European country attacks the Western Hemisphere, it'll be treated as an attack on their own soil. Would they have actually honored it? I don't know. But
they were trying to deter the Europeans from meddling in Latin American affairs with the Monroe Doctrine as, United States backyard. But, let's try to get to the present. Of course, to get to the present, we have to talk a little bit about the history, including as far back as Bolivar. But let's get to the more present time. Like Chavez obviously took power, right, in the late 90s, and it started to spread, right? I mean, I think one of the first moves Chavez did was pay off the IMF debt that Argentina had in exchange for some favors from Argentina, and that was really his step towards integration and towards allying with the current president of Argentina's husband, her late husband. And then Bolivia came in, and with the election of Evo Morales. I believe he was elected the same year I went to Spain in 2006. So this was like a few years after Chavez was already in power. But Morales had attempted before that to run. When I was in Peru, he attempted to run. And finally he won in 2006. And by then, really, Ecuador and other countries were starting to unite. Leftist governments in general were starting, even in Central America, in Nicaragua. In 2007, Ortega was elected. So that's where really things started to change, And I met comrades that were from Honduras that knew Zelaya personally. And we're fighting to get Zelaya back in power. His wife recently ran, and there was rigged elections there as well, and intimidation of voters. I mean, I met people from Honduras in this forum, so it's been great to meet with all these different people.
Well, there's and one of the last holdouts might be, I think that really Colombia, my own country, I would say that it is very likely to have in 2018 to be the next country to join the Bolivian Revolution with Jorge Robledo, who is running. And here's the thing: is what makes me think that this could happen, because Santos, unless he amends the Constitution or something, can't run again. So now it'd be some new guy coming up in his party, and then on the Uribist party.
I think all democratic means to restore Zelaya to power have been exhausted at this point. And maybe Chavez was right when he wanted to send troops to Honduras. At this point, I think Nicaragua needs to support the guerrillas, and they need to make a forced restoration of Zelaya against the fascist forces that are taking over Honduras, which has resulted in the deaths of thousands of children who have fled the United States and in return were deported back to Honduras to their deaths. There's confirmed cases of Honduran children that, on order from Obama, were sent to their deaths. That's an indisputable fact to this point, and a violation of international law.
And look, Nicaragua, they should be willing to, because the same party that's in charge of Nicaragua now, the Sandinistas, they should be willing to, because look what the United States.
I actually talked with people that confirmed with me personally that they are in preparations for a guerrilla struggle from Nicaragua that'll be sent into Honduras. That's a fact, but it will take some time. Yeah.
Remember what the United States did in Nicaragua back in the 80s? They had the United States with the CIA trafficked cocaine through their country using the CIA. And the Contra, they call them the Contra rebels. I refuse to say that word. I say Contra terrorists, Contra mercenaries. Contra, not rebels. They weren't rebels because for
those who know Spanish, Contra is counter, is against. And you're right. These should be called Contras. They should be called what they were, mercenaries and traitors of their own country if they happen to be Honduran. I'm sure a lot of them are foreigners. I'm sorry, it happened to be Nicaraguan. We're talking about when they were fighting at the Sandinistas. That's right.
Yeah, and the Sandinistas, unlike what a lot of people think, because, with their guerrilla ties, were actually democratically elected to power.
Initially they were,
faced an
absolutely.
election.
Mm-hmm.
They faced an election. I think it was 1980 they faced an election. I think the armed struggle took over in 1979, and 80 they had an election. So the people of Nicaragua had agreed to have the Sandinistas in charge because they didn't want to return to the old fascist government that they had in the past.
Mm-hmm.
They wanted change.
The Somoza government,
but then the Contras tried to revert it. The Contras tried to revert back to the fascist government with the aid of the United States and the aid of cocaine money that they were trafficking cocaine through Central America up through Mexico back through the United States, and they were on the lucrative, drug market that the United States is still on. The United States government has proven to have been on was Fast and Furious in 2010, and so Nicaragua.
Well, yeah, at that point, Holder should have stepped down, but there was so many scandals since then. I mean, giving gun to cartels. I mean, this itself proves this is a consistent policy, regardless of who's Attorney General, regardless of the color of their skin. The consistent policy of making the border with Mexico unstable, and the wall is nothing but symbolism. The corporations love to exploit immigrants and guarantee that they get through tunnels, through the ocean, through however they get through, and so that so-called illegal immigration continues, and that the drug war continues, and that the cartels keep fighting each other, and Mexico remains divided. Even though there is a revolutionary movement of students, in particular, fighting in Mexico now. Peña Nieto obviously rigged elections, right? Like Harper, and what happened in Honduras. I mean, you have rigged elections, the Bush method, you could call it. They really introduced rigging elections in Florida in 2000. But I'm not a fan of Democrats. I'm just saying that this method, is probably trained by the United States, just like the School of the Americas, how they're treating torture and murder, and how they were sent down. I mean, Noriega himself, right? Who was accused of being in the drug trade. He was trained by the School of America in the United States, and he worked with the DEA. They just used that, when they didn't like him anymore. Like when Saddam initially was an ally, or Bin Laden himself.
Yeah, Saddam and Noriega scenario are very similar. I really think that it literally came down to at one point Noriega stopped giving the United States a certain amount of money, probably was the cocaine trade, because Noriega was directly connected in the cocaine trade. But so was the CIA, and they probably were all working together. My guess is that really the Noriega at some point said that he will actually keep the money or keep more than he was supposed to, and then they took him out for that. And then
he also met with Fidel. They didn't like that because Washington had orders in that time in all Latin American nations not to meet with Fidel.
Well, yeah, and the thing was that towards
the end, Bill Clinton tried to order Chavez not to meet with Fidel, but that didn't work. Chavez was about to be intimidated.
I can just imagine. I can just imagine what Chavez thought when when he heard Clinton of all people, tell him not to meet with Fidel.
Probably wasn't surprised. You knew about American imperialism for a long time.
I could just imagine Chavez getting on with his bad English, getting on the phone and be like, "Hey, Mr. Clinton, how about meet with your mistress?" And then just hang up the phone.
Yeah, if he found out about it by then, he'd be like, "You are a donkey, Mr. Clinton. Just like Bush, you are a donkey. Mr. Clinton, Mr. Bush, all of you are donkeys."
Obama didn't have to call it donkey. He went on a very intellectual, describing what he pretty much said what Colonel West said about people like Obama. He said do you know that I met a gentleman who looked just like Trotsky, and I told him that, and he took it as a compliment at the forum. What? At this? I told him the Stalinists were extinct. I mean, there is no Stalinist show up at these forums. Some Maoists, but it was a nice conversation I had with this gentleman. If you haven't seen my if you haven't seen my picture I put up on my Facebook, I kind of look like Che Guevara now. I changed my profile. Finally, actually, if people have me on Facebook, I'm not lurking in the shadows. You can see my face. You can see exactly who I am now. By the way, there was many members of the Liberation Theology movement as well that were present at the forum, not just Latin Americans. That is a predominant movement, though, in Latin America. If you look at former head of state of Paraguay, Lugo, he was part of Liberation Theology. Matter of fact, the Pope himself was part of Liberation Theology. He's going to have a trip in September to Philly, and some of the comrades might come up for his visit for that. Well, I have to argue against, that I wouldn't say that Pope Francis, he might have been at one time, but he's not anymore. It's like, because what he's
Well,
arguing is
he
against.
certainly fought corruption and
But-
spoke out for the poor and many other issues that no other pope has ever
let me
done.
quote what he literally just said about a week ago. He said that any person that, and this really goes against any guerrillas, fighting, any resistance fighting. He literally said, this, how can somebody be a guerrilla if if he follows what the Pope says, and that says that anybody that makes or possesses a gun cannot call himself a Christian. So what? Then a lot of people.
Was he saying that out of reaction to what happened in Charleston? Is that the context?
No, he was not. He was just saying that as a declaratory statement.
So he said that before what happened in Charleston. Then
I think it was before, probably. It was not in a reaction. He didn't mention the Charleston thing. I haven't even, or if he did mention it, was a different.
Well, he
thing.
doesn't have to. And you know what? Regardless of what happened in Charleston, my comrades here, let's talk to, they agree. I mean, it shouldn't be about a gun issue, nor should it be about a mental health issue. It should be about a hate issue. This guy was full of hatred. He made a manifesto against blacks. I mean, it's clear what his intentions were. He was trying to start a race war, and he failed. And now a lot of state houses are going to actually drop the Confederate flag. And this race war where he wanted the whites to win, his delusions have come to an end.
It's already been dropped, but it wasn't dropped by them. This lady's going to face 3 years in prison for what she did, because they're going to say that's destruction of state property or whatever. But she pulled the flag down herself. She climbed all the way to the top of this black lady. And
yeah, that's ridiculous. They would try to put her to jail for that. Yeah.
I think that she should be applauded, because I don't care what you think about the Confederate flag, even if you actually believe it is I know some people are not legitimately not racist to fly the flag. And are just think it's Southern heritage, but I would think that there'd be a better symbol for Southern heritage than.
By the way, do you want to put the number out in case we have time for some callers to ask some questions on socialism?
We can't. We don't have access to callers today.
Yeah, that's probably why it didn't work when I initially called. But I got a call to my phone, so luckily I was able to come through. But people can at least call in from Skype, right?
Nobody's running the studio. On this call, nobody's running the studio right now, so we're just here talking till the end of the show.
Okay, so Jules doesn't set up Skype calls for anybody.
Set up, but for sure I told her that she could leave and go do her own thing after, because she's she's very busy.
Next time I will be running the studio. Next time I will be back in Tampa and be able to do all that.
Also, I just gotta say, once you didn't miss out, you didn't miss out on. Working, if you were working this weekend, you would have been working in one of the hottest weekends we've had in Florida as I can remember. I mean, it was 95.
It was raining a lot in Philly. Yeah, I was out of the heat for a while.
Well, it's been just a hot June in general. I mean, it's just that it's continued. I mean, it's been so hot down here. That's why I didn't go. That's why I didn't go down to South America this time, because it's way too hot down there for me to go. And they don't have air conditioning down there. It's like,
well, actually, there's parts of Peru that are like colder than Florida. Okay.
Well, yeah, there's parts, but I'm talking about where I'd be visiting would be hot. It's like sure, Bogota's not the same. Bogota, you have to wear a jacket in summer. You have to wear a jacket. In winter, it actually doesn't change that much. But in summer, it's summer. It's pretty shocking when you get there, because you're wearing a jacket, and this time of year. This is actually around this time of year 2 years ago I went there. But
come back, Chris. Go ahead.
Talk about also, at 21st century socialism. We're talking about,
Yeah, that was another thing. We talked about what our vision is 20 years from now. And we talked about the revolution and how socialism could be fulfilled, and not let our guard down. So there's a reversal of the revolution, as is what happened with prior revolutions.
It wasn't 20 years from now. It was 2020. It was the 2020 manifesto that we were.
No, I just said in the meeting, they all asked us what our vision was from 20 years from now.
Oh.
And I contributed to the conversation. But we did write a manifesto about 2020. And I wasn't saying the revolution would be 20 years from now. I said after the revolution, which would already have happened by 20 years from now. That's what I said. And then what we would do, not let our guard down, so there wouldn't be reversals of the revolution, et cetera.
I think that, the revolution, though, it's one of the main problems, I think, is just that it's stuff like what's happened this weekend. People that are supposed to be supposed revolutionaries, I would say they're supposed to be. I don't think they would call them. They're not like us, like guerrilla revolutionaries. They're just these people are in the truth movement. They're talking about exposing what the government's doing, but they're more fixated on this Supreme Court ruling than they are about the TPP, which the TPP should be all to talk about right now, really, because it's disturbing if you read what's in it, and we're about to become the 5th country to be in it. I was surprised that Chile is not backing out of it, but then I found out. I think that out of one country that they're kind of like Peru. They're only center left, and so they're just technically socialist, but they're just center left. So it's not shocking that they're not pulling back out of the TPP. But Brunei, which is a very rich Islamic kingdom in the Southeast Asian islands out there, that they're part of it. Singapore is in Indochina, at the tip of the Indochina Peninsula. New Zealand, of course, joined in. The United States is now going to be number 5 because Obama has been granted fast-track authority.
Well, Tom may want to sleep anyway, sir. Go ahead, Chris.
But Obama has been granted fast-track authority, so now it's going to be signed. There's really no debating at this point. I mean, when it comes to the debate's over. I mean, we could try our best to show a resistance to it, but Obama's going to fast-track it. He has been given the authority, and now he's going to sign the TPP. It's a total. Our Constitution's practically void. I say that we're going from corporate fascist to corporate military junta after this. I'm not exaggerating. And in fact, I don't want to get the fear stirred up, but
hey, you know what? An idea just occurred to me, Chris.
What?
One of the passengers here with me, maybe they'd like to contribute to our show. Is that all right? They could talk a couple minutes about what they experienced at the forum, because this is relevant to the topic. We were talking about socialism, what our vision for socialism is. That was like the main topic for all the different workshops.
I was talking about the TPP, though. I mean, that's what I was kind of wanting to talk about.
I think he knows about the TPP, but I'm saying at some point before 11, if we get somebody, if they're willing to talk a little bit to you, you can free to ask them a couple of questions if you want, since we're not having callers.
Bring the most interesting person in the car there. I don't want anybody that's warring people. I'm kidding, but just yeah. I mean,
well, the person I was thinking is a rapper activist from St. Pete, who was performing and was who was part of the forum. But I don't know. Would he do a rap on the phone or something for us? I mean, that would be. No. I wasn't asking about that. I was saying, if you had a couple questions about the forum, you hear from somebody else about get another person's perspective.
Next week I want the callers back because we already had. Well, we had.
Yeah, if I went around the studio, we'll have callers. We'll try to arrange something.
Well, we'll have Chris from Canada, the call in probably. I mean,
yeah, but think about Chris from Canada. I mean, you heard what he said about communists or whatever. Like, we asked him what he thought of such politician. He said, "Oh, she's a communist." Like, we're supposed to assume that's a bad thing. He really doesn't have any political education on issues that we're talking about.
I was just. Was it bad that I just wanted him on here so I could laugh at his Canadian accent a little bit? I mean, not in a bad way, but just
yeah, we're supposed to be a serious show. Yeah, we can make jokes here or there, but ultimately, the issues we're talking about are serious. We should have serious callers.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say it's sometimes serious, but if you can get your point across in a not so serious matter, I mean, yeah, it depends. I mean, you don't have to be coming on here talking like. Talking like an intellectual or something, but you just have to be able to get your point across, and you can't be just going on here and start turning into a, as I say, if you're just listening to a talk show.
Can you hold on a sec, Chris? Chris, hold on a second.
You ever listen to those talk shows that are just like, it just turns into a 2 hours or actually 4 hours. That's the thing about them. And it just turns into cold babble, just nonsense.
The gentleman I told you about, the rapper activist, he said he could talk to you a couple minutes about the forum if you'd like.
Right now?
Yeah, just for a couple minutes, and he'll pass it back to me.
Okay.
All right, hold on a second. It's not on speakerphone, by the way. I'm just going to pass it to him. Hold on.
Yeah, but it probably would be better if it's on
Hello?
Direct call. Hello, you're live on UCY Radio. Al didn't tell me your name.
Yeah, my name is Pedro el Poeta, Pedro the Poet, translated.
Say, Yo hablo español también, pero esto es un programa en inglés. This is an English show, but yeah, it's like I good thing translated for the audience out there.
Yeah,
But
my name is Pedro, and it's El Poeta. That's my performance name, which means Pedro the Poet.
anyways, if you have what you wanted to talk about exactly. I mean, we're talking about socialism in the 21st century. Talk about the Bolivian Revolution. We're talking about Syriza, and we haven't got to Podemos yet, but I think we'll talk about that later. But what exactly do you want to talk about?
Well, I was gonna, just kind of share, I guess, what Alex wanted me to do here is to share kind of the experience that I had at the U.S. Social Forum this year that just took place in Philadelphia. It's great to be around people that are, transformative thinkers, people that are trying to change the system. A lot of people realize that the system is flawed, but not a lot of people are moving. And for us to have a movement, we need people to move. It was good to see a lot of people come together and put their ideas together and try to, come up with solutions or plans or strategies to kind of make things go into effect.
Yes, I heard you were talking about the vision of socialism or the vision of the revolution in 20 years. And so what exactly was talked about? Because Al gave a kind of a vague description of it, but I kind of just want some of the details. What are you talking about?
They talked about a lot of things. That particular thing that he's talking about, I'm not quite sure if we attended the same panels. They did talk about projecting plans and trying to change the way people see the way the social mindscape looks at things. For example, changing the vernacular, the way we deal with things. When we are protesting, we need to get rid of the idea, the terminology of violent or nonviolent, and start creating new ways of looking at it as who's the aggressor and who's the person on the defense, or the people on the defense. And defining if we're going to use the word violent, what violence is, and then creating a plan to put that into effect in the future, so we start seeing things differently, and also putting plans into effect to change the infrastructure so that we can change things as a whole. So we start, point by point. There are a lot of issues that need to be dealt with, and we need to kind of create an infrastructure that can deal with all those different satellites around each problem, and that's something that's going to take time, and this might be the thing that he's talking about, the putting a plan into effect for the next 20 years instead of thinking about how is this going to change now. How is this law that we are changing not just affecting what's happening now, but affecting what's going to happen in the next 50 years. And this is something that Immortal Technique, who was there on the show, actually touched upon too, is how are we going to get the actions that we have now to be beneficial to us 50 years, 100 years from now, from the future. He did bring up a point like that. So we need to start looking at the way that laws are implemented, not just to what milestone are we crossing right now, but how is it going to affect us 50 years from now?
Yes, and I think that when you talk about what we need to be looking towards in the future, I think one of the, what I was talking about is that the fact that you need to establish, you have to be constantly on guard because, even after revolutions happen in other countries, in the Bolivarian countries, the imperialist aggressors have been trying to attack and trying to sabotage these countries.
Absolutely.
For, ever since practically the start, ever since that really Venezuela took a affirmative stance against the imperialists, against the DC, and became actively a socialist country. At the very beginning it was kind of unclear, but after around 2001, there's been sabotage attempts, left and right, including the biggest one, the coup attempt in 2002, and then there was another coup attempt against Maduro in 2015, earlier, this year in February.
Right.
And there's been many different sabotage attempts, from literally stuff like attacking the power
Well,
grid.
it's kind of
Hello?
than their pollution that occurs. There's going to be, the country, whatever the region or whatever is fighting, vulnerable. It takes a lot of resources. It takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot from the people, to go through a revolution. And I know this. I escaped the war in Nicaragua myself. I was born in the middle of the Sandinista and Contra War, and was in the middle of it both. I had parents on both sides of the war. So I've seen this, and I've seen the vulnerability of the people, of the government that is left, or the whatever it is that is running the country or the region at the time. People know that, and there are going to be vultures out there that are going to be waiting for the rotting flesh of the country to come and feed off of. It's also one of the most important times in a revolution. It's where you're rebuilding. So you kind of got to take those dilapidated edifices down, and you got to rebuild it into something that's going to have a stronger foundation. And that's what some of the most that vulnerable moments after the revolution, after the war. Those are going to be the moments that are the most important, because you're rebuilding. But those are also the moments that are going to leave us most vulnerable. So that also needs to be taken into account.
So, yeah, you said that you actually survived, the war between the Contras and the Sandinistas. I was just curious. I think I know your stance on that. It's just that are you generally supportive of the current government, Ortega, the Sandinistas of today? Even though the Sandinistas today are actually quite different than the Sandinistas of the 80s, they've kind of moderated. But
of course, I was actually living in Nicaragua at the time when Daniel Ortega got elected, and I was there for that I was there for the year before he got elected to the year after he got elected, and I like the fact that he was able to run and take the democratic process, and a lot of people when he came into power, or put himself into power in Nicaragua, really appreciated and admired what was going on. The war wasn't necessarily something that was kind of instigated by us. It was something that was kind of implemented upon us because someone had a foreign agenda. And so people were liking what he did. The alphabetization that happened in Nicaragua. Well, we took our alphabetized from a number in the teens to a number in like the 70s or 80%. Our coin value going up. A lot of things that happened were starting to go in a positive direction before the war started, and so we never got to see it play out because we had people here in the United States looking to tear down that monster of communism and socialism. So that's something that we never got to see play out. So, but the way that he did it this time, regardless of the fact that there were shady things happen. I mean, we found ballots floating in the ocean, literally blocks from my house, where I lived in Nicaragua, and it was, it reminded me a lot of what had happened in Florida while I was living there when the whole elections happened that were rigged. We see this happening everywhere, but what we see also is an active participation in people that haven't been active in the voting polls before, because a party that they once had faith in is now reemerging as an actual candidate in a democratic process, and that's exciting to the people. And anytime you want something to happen, you got to excite the people. It did create a lot of excitement to have Daniel Ortega come back and run, regardless of whether you agreed or not with his political views as a whole. But the fact that, it was this progressive way of thinking for the country to allow someone that was once a dictator to actually run for office.
But he was democratic elected. The Sandinistas were democratic elected in 1980. They took power in a guerrilla violent way, but it was also from a very corrupt government. Really, Nicaragua prior to the Sandinistas was under a fascist dictatorship at one point. In fact, Che, like I was talking about earlier, that there was a speech I was at one time. I thought it was kind of powerful because he was saying in 1965 he was mentioning all these countries that were fascist dictatorships at the time: Nicaragua, Venezuela, Argentina. I'm like thinking, wow, I mean, things are really changed. Che would love to have been alive today to see how they've went socialist. They've got rid of their fascist past. But and you talk about the war, but the war again, it was implemented. The war was caused by a country with a foreign agenda, which was the United States government funding the Contra. I can't stand to call them Contra rebels. They were Contra mercenaries. They were funded by the U.S. government.
Exactly. That's absolutely correct. And I had one of my fathers that actually was taken in to fight for the Contras, and people, they would turn families against family. But they literally they kicked the door down, and they took the able men. And they forced them to fight. These weren't people that were a lot of these guys were recruited to be on the front lines by these, as you call them, mercenaries. They were mercenaries. They were trained people that were taking innocent people to fight their war with them or for them in some instances. And things got ugly, man.
Yes, and one of the things that was really hushed up and you don't hear about these days is that at that time, the United States government was heavily involved in the drug trade, and so were the Contra mercenaries. They were very involved in the drug trade, and that's how they were financing their campaigns in the combat. And and that was hushed up also. So, and that nowadays you see a parallel, but nowadays it just was blatant drug cartels. The United States government practically admits just a few years ago about giving drug cartels arms, and yet there's no outrage. It's really shocking. And it's funny because they use that same accusation to denounce leftist movements that actually have no connection with drug drug cartels, when they're actually it's like they it's a severe hypocrisy, because they're the ones that have actually probably still I would say they're definitely still involved with the drug trade in the United States government. I mean, there's documents that show this kind of stuff, that they're connected to giant ones in Mexico, giant ones overseas, and also let's not forget about our brothers over in the Middle East, that have had to suffer this war of aggression. And part of this war of aggression, people don't like to talk about it, is opium. The poppy plants. They're not burning those poppy plants that they find in Afghanistan. They're getting transported home just like they were back in Vietnam. They used to transport poppy plants via the supposed caskets of dead bodies. American soldiers were supposed to be in there, but it's really just, poppy plants, that later gets turned into heroin once you refine it. So of course, there's, South America. I feel like South America has, in some ways, a connection with the Middle East, because both of us have been really back in the past. South America was the ones that were being targeted heavily during the years of Operation Condor by the U.S. government. Nowadays, it's the Middle East that's being heavily targeted with these, fake. Some of these countries, like what's going on, these fake opposition movements in Syria, or what happened in Libya, where they really just unleash the gates of hell, of these Islamists that they call, and then they say they call them rebels. They unleash it on, and then they say that it's a popular resistance against these leaders, but really it's a foreign supported mercenary / terrorist movement.
Of course, we've created lingo, and we've heavily charged what these words, the connotation that these words take in people's minds. And so when those words are used, it sends a trigger, and people are willing to believe that this is what we're doing. Oh, they are rebels. They are dangerous. They are terrorists. This and this. And then we use that as an excuse to go in and take over and replace the pieces in the chessboard that we want replaced with, less threatening, opponents or people, buying people over, or whatever it means we need to do to change the game to go favorable to us, And when you mention, with the drug trade and everything, and people always, they think of the things, and they think of Colombia, I think of stuff like that. It's happening, major time in a lot of South American countries. In Peru, it's actually worse than it is in Colombia. And this is something that people don't understand when we talk about we have a drug problem here in America. It's beyond the drug problem here in America. It's tied. It's woven into all these other countries that are experiencing these things due to our involvement with drug cartels all over the place, and it's affecting the farmers in all of these countries. It's affecting their economy. It's affecting their families in a very real way that people don't know when we talk about the war on drugs here and ignore the war on drugs that should be happening worldwide. The actual war on drugs.
Well, yeah, this war on drugs in the United States is really, there's so many things tied into it, but one of the major things is the private prison sector that these for-profit prisons.
Hold on. I'm gonna pass the phone back to Al over here, okay? But it was great being on the show. I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming on the Voice of Rebellion Radio, and everybody, we're gonna have Al Schwartz coming back on the show for the last 35 minutes of. Right now, we have 35 minutes left of this program.
Hey, Chris, I'm going to make sure to have Pedro El Poeta, who you can find on Facebook, El Poeta, ELPOETA, 2 words. Get the recording of the program once we get it up on YouTube tomorrow. And anybody's free to look him up on Facebook and Adam. So, yeah, that was his 2 cents for the discussion. I'm thinking we could plan a future show with him as well. But he was there with me for much of the forum. He was in the march with me in the front lines, and him and I think alike a lot of these issues. So it was good he was able to contribute to that.
Seems like an actual comrade, and he seems to be actually very educated and experienced. I mean, he's lived through a lot of stuff.
His stepdad was on the other side of the fight, with among the Contras, but he's he's a leftist, obviously, so sympathetic to the Sandinistas, and he's gone through his own struggle, as we all have, as poor people, as so-called minorities. And through his lyrics, through his music, he had incredible performances. I filmed part of them, several pictures. He was able to express himself in a very similar way to Moral Technique and Rebel Diaz, and it was very reciprocal among the people that stayed in the church and then went after the forum, not far from where the university was, to the church to witness his concert and see other musicians and artists from the area. We went to a local garden, met with Rebel Diaz, and met with members of Code Pink, who we're planning to go to Q with at the end of the year, Medea Benjamin, etc. So I was able to see a lot of comrades. Sharon Hankala, she ran for vice president in 2012 with the Green Party. She was there. I missed Jill Stein. She came the day before. So I was able to meet with all these different people, and we came up with Bruce Wright, Reverend Bruce Wright from St. Pete. This gentleman we spoke to is from St. Pete, so he's actually closer to you than me, Chris. But I'm sure we can plan to meet up, the 3 of us as well. But this whole experience, meeting local activists that I didn't even know existed until we were able to come together in Philly. And it's funny because a lot of people in Philly said the same thing. They said, "Hey, you live in Philly too? I didn't know you." Like through these events, it helps in networking. It goes beyond what you can reach online. Through personally connecting, spiritually, emotionally, connecting with your fellow comrades, and you're in sync with each other and the real struggle for the working class in this nation and the world over.
Yeah. These events are pretty important. I wish we had one down in the southeast, because they seem to be all up north. I mean, we have the New York.
Well, it's funny. They had 3 social forums, right? And one of them was in Jackson, Mississippi. But I'm not going to go to Jackson, Mississippi. I don't know anybody there. I know a lot of comrades in Philly, so I ended up going to the one over there. The other one was in San Jose, California, which is a little far for me. But I heard it was intentional also this time that they had 3 separate ones, so that less people go to Philly because the new Philly was more independent, more radical. But in spite of that, a lot of people were able to go. It's funny because you heard a baby. There's no baby on the van. That's somebody's ringtone. I don't know if you heard that. But, this has been an incredible experience.
Yeah, I was just, Yeah, Jackson, Mississippi. I mean, I think that would be an adventure to say the least. I mean, just being out in regular life.
I don't know if they tried to burn a Confederate flag, right? There's stuff going on in Tampa in regards to that, and it's all over now. The nation, the contrast with the history of those who want to stay in the time before the Civil War and those who want to move on and towards the future. And as you said, it's also a distraction, right? We need to focus on issues going on presently and try to change them. Yes, know the history, but not get too fixated on it, you know? So, yeah, this is what's happened so far in the forum now. It's fresh in my mind that we're focusing on the present and the future. What is our vision, several years from now that society can be what we want it to be? What can we do, be the change you want to see, as Gandhi had said, I mean, that particular workshop was talking 20 years, I don't think Pedro was present for, but there was very similar ones as well. We've talked about this, the common vision, the common entity, the importance of unity. That's essential. And this has really helped me, inspire me for my third book and the articles that I plan to write ahead.
Yeah, but that also while you were gone over the weekend, there was a giant rally on I-4 or something like that. People were going from Brandon to Tampa or vice versa. And there was Confederate flags.
I heard about it.
So, I mean, there was things going for and against the Confederate flag in Florida.
Well, they're outnumbered, I heard. There was like 20 anti-Confederates versus 200 Hicks. So, yeah, they had to get out of there. They couldn't really burn the flag. Unfortunately, there's a lot of Hicks around the Tampa area. We need to get more revolutionaries and these comrades in St. Pete together.
No, you know that the world's largest Confederate flag is in Brandon, Florida, on I-4.
The largest what?
Confederate flag in the world is right here in Tampa Bay.
Wow, right in our backyard. Yeah, that's incredible.
So, I mean, I'm just saying, it would be pretty revolutionary if somebody burnt the flag right here.
We have to talk to my comrades about that, yeah. Hey, did you guys know the largest Confederate flag in the world is in Brandon, Florida? Right in the neck of our woods. Think about it if somebody set fire to that. Right?
No, I know it's a deal. We can't be like that one the one black woman that climbed to the top of that thing. That this one's 200
she
feet
got in
tall
trouble.
Like that. If we fell from that thing, we're dead. So we can't climb.
That reminds me of that kid who attacked a police cruiser, which of course had no cop inside of it. And then his parents convinced him to surrender to the police, and that was basically like 30 years of making an example out of him. Every time you trust the system or you do an act and expect yourself not to get punished, you can bet you're going to get punished. So we need to do more intelligent acts. The cops probably would have forgot about the kid, not even bothered to look for him, right? But then when he surrendered, now he's facing 30 years. There's more emphasis in the capitalist system on the protection of property than on people themselves.
Well, that's not even true, because look at it this way. When the banks did the same thing in Baltimore as the rioters were doing, the rioters burnt down some private property. But when the banks foreclosed on houses, they also ordered for 1,300 houses that could have been used.
You're right. I should say the property of the rich. They care about the property of the rich more than the property or the people that are of the underclasses in general.
Yeah, it's not even about like property versus people at this point. It's the property and people, the rich, versus the property and people, the poor. But you would think with us outnumbering the rich, which that's the thing. Once we all align, the poor become a very powerful group, because we make up the overwhelming majority of this country. I mean, at this point,
regardless if a cop's going to be bribed or not, like a good analogy here, right? Let's say a taxi man, a poor working class taxi man, has a fare for $60 or whatever, and they don't pay and they run off and he gets the police involved. 9 times out of 10, they're not going to investigate, right? But let's say there was a Wall Street banker and he had his money stolen from his home or was mugged or whatever. Of course, they're going to investigate that, right? So it's like how they handle people based on their social class, based on their social standing, And that's not necessarily because the cop thinks that he's going to benefit from it, but he'll investigate because, this is a man of importance, of money. Does that mean he's an honorable man? How did he acquire these money? I mean, these are things that are not questioned within the capitalist system, according to the way that things are handled day to day.
And also, I was thinking is that we haven't covered one thing about, what about Podemos? Didn't they have a recent election of some kind recently in Spain? I think didn't they have a legislator election?
I think Podemos got some more seats in the parliament, and they may even get the presidency. It could be like a recent situation.
Well, yeah, because isn't Spain on the same kind of system as Greece? Like, whoever gets the majority of parliament
Their
gets
economy is almost as bad as Greece. Okay, sorry, what was the question?
But isn't their political system the same? Like, if they get the majority of parliament, then their leader becomes also like the actual leader of the country.
Well, they have presidential and prime ministership elections, but obviously it'll help sway if it's a close election how many are in the parliament.
Well, yeah, it's not like Greece. Like Greece, it doesn't. They're intertwined. Like whoever has the parliament.
Well, Greece had a presidential election. They did, but the fact that Syriza shortly before that, got gains in the parliament, and it was close at one point, helped the fact that Alexis was able to be elected as a leader of the Syriza party, and then became prime minister of Greece.
In Greece, yeah, but isn't the prime minister in Greece the actual head of state? Like the president is like the prime minister.
Yeah, they have more power than the president, although in Russia that's not necessarily true, right? I mean, Putin was prime minister and president, and as president, he's just, basically in the same position, different title.
Well, yeah, it's like in Russia, the prime minister is like the vice president, and the president is the president.
No. What did I just say? Putin was prime minister before this and had just as much power as he had as president. So it's interchangeable in Russia. It's not the same in Europe, though. Prime minister is the one that really has the power.
Well, in Russia, I would say that it's Putin in a way has been in charge for the last 15 years in Russia because he's the only one that seems to have a clue what he's doing. Even Medvedev, wasn't. He's a good sidekick to Putin, but in reality, Medvedev, if he was allowed to rule the country by himself, I'm afraid he would become too pro-European, pro EU, and fall to the West. He kind of folds under pressure. Putin is the only one that seems to be able to play the game of chess as the West and win.
Cool. But so what do you mean fall to the left?
To the West.
Oh, the West. Yes, I understand. Yeah, because, as you know, the left in Russia and in Greece, they're anti-EU. They don't want to be part of the EU. I mean, obviously Russia, but even in Greece, right, there's most of the leftists in Greece now are talking about leaving the Eurozone for the benefit of the Greek masses.
Yeah, but I was saying that Medvedev, if he was allowed without Putin in there, to just rule the country would just, Russia would fall to the West, and they would just become like they were under Yeltsin. I think it may not totally like that, but at least go halfway to that point. Putin's the only one that seems to be able to, stick to his guns, and he's succeeding. They try to sanction him, they fail. His economy shoots right back up. When they thought that they were talking about how Russia was going to collapse, now they're almost better than ever. It was just a few months you're talking about. The United States, however, the economy still hasn't recovered from 7 years ago, really. And it looks like it will double dip again. In fact, in this time when it double dips, there will be a dollar collapse probably going on with it. I mean, a lot of economists are predicting that the dollar will collapse in a year or two time.
Well, the euro is stronger than the dollar, not by much, but it is, even till today with the euro crisis. Germany is still a top economic power. Greece has a huge debt to Germany. As a matter of fact, part of the Greek deal that was offered was that the Nazi reparations, right, for the Nazi invasion of Greece be paid off. That would have cut the German debt in half. Of course, the Germans refused that, and that is in part because they didn't want the domino effect to happen, right? All the other countries suffered at the hands of the Nazis to start asking for reparations. Germany can certainly afford the reparations because they are a top economy, but they don't want to go ahead and do that. As a matter of fact, they don't care about using German tax dollars to support neo-Nazis in Ukraine, right, to support their interests there. But, nor do they want to pay reparations. So a lot of people say that, Germany, their economy is successful because they're socialistic, because of this and that. And they may have some socialism within their system in Northern Europe in general, not in EU countries. But in their foreign policy, they're extremely right-wing. And, in the treatment of immigrants, not Turks, because there's so many Turks in Germany, they couldn't really discriminate against them. But, other smaller groups they can still go after. So Germany's hardly this, socialist paradise or anything like that.
Well, like I said, Germany is actually a country that's, has a big problem with fascists in their country, Nazis, neo-Nazis are they have a party like a 1/9 supposedly I think it's up to 10% of the country is somewhat supportive of this party. Like 5% of the country voted for it in the last presidential election that they had, which the president also, just to clarify, president has less power than prime minister or the chancellor. They don't even have a prime minister; they have a chancellor.
That's right.
Germany with Angela Merkel.
Merkel, yeah.
But they had a presidential election in 2012.
You ever see that picture of Merkel standing alongside Netanyahu? And I forget if it's her or Netanyahu. I think it's her. Like the way it wasn't Photoshop. I think it was unintentional, but the way the shadows were, she had the Hitler mustache.
It's like it's alarming. Like when they showed like pictures of her.
And they actually showed a picture of a little girl looked just like the version of Merkel as a little child in a black and white image alongside Hitler. And I proved that it was false. These ridiculous images people take for truth. I looked up her date of birth. She was born in the 50s after Hitler died. I mean, unless she was with the real Hitler in Argentina, there's
like
rumors that the man who was killed in East Germany was actually his double. Who knows? But I don't know if she ever met Hitler.
Well, she would have been like 80 years old.
And if she did, she was a child. Doesn't mean she's a Hitlerist. But certainly in her foreign policy, she may not like the neo-Nazis, but in Ukraine. But they're definitely supporting them. They're using them as pawns in their game of chess against Russia.
Well, yeah, of course they are. And there's only one party there that it seems like not just her party, but most of the German parties are supportive of the neo-Nazis in Ukraine. The only one that's actually telling the truth is the party that's literally named the Left. In Germany, they have about
yeah. And the conservatives in Germany are far to the left of American Democrats, of course. So you can imagine like the far right groups in Germany. I mean, the far right. How far to the right this country is in general.
Well, the left, and I was going to bring this up, is that the left party in Germany has about 1/8 of the parliament.
Government. Go ahead.
The socialists in Germany have about 1/8 of the parliament. And then there's the, social democrat traitors, I would say, is what you can call them.
Yeah, that's what they are. They're centrists. Yep.
40% of and they support the neo-Nazis as well in Germany. They have about 40% of parliament. Half of parliament goes to the Merkel's party, and the rest of it goes to the Green Party, which I don't know what exactly their stance is on anything, really. I haven't looked at it.
Well, a lot of Green Party members in other nations, unfortunately, are to the right. The ones here obviously are more to the left, but it depends on the nation you're looking at. To be fair, I don't think Ingrid Betancourt was any way, shape, or form the right. She was trying to negotiate with the FARC as the Green presidential candidate in Colombia and was kidnapped. I mean, the whole situation was disgusting. And, of course, Chavez tried to negotiate. And when the European ambassador for FARC, a Colombian national, arrived in Venezuela, Chavez sent him to Santos prison, and justifiably so, because Chavez was aware at that time these weren't really revolutionaries. These were narco traffickers that kidnapped, fellow leftists for money. So.
And also, there's one, it's like North America in general. I think the Green parties are usually towards the left. Like in Canada, it's the same way as America. They have about the same stance, on the position of, but they're actually, the Green Party is more radical in some regards. Like the Green Party in Canada actually supports 9/11 truce and supports, a little bit more radical stuff. It seems to be the only legitimate party.
Well, yeah, Cherney seems to be more of a conspiracy realist.
Yeah, unlike Stein, and he's a lot more charismatic, I would say, too.
I can't even claim to know what Stein's view is on that. I've never talked to her about it or seen her talk about 9/11.
Well, it's like Cherney was. I like what he was saying. He's like he was pretty much saying it's like, if I'm elected, I will be the first openly cannabis using president in the history, and I will paint the White House green.
It's funny because people kept coming up to me at the forum. They're like, "Oh, you got cigars there? Let's go roll." It's like, no, I actually smoke tobacco.
No, they should. You know what's going to happen if Daryl Sherney's if Daryl Sherney's becomes president and he for the State of the Union.
You got a caller? No, I'm just kidding. I was going to do one of those fake Southern accents, right?
at the state dinner, you would have Cheech and Chong be speakers there.
Yeah, Cheech and Chong will be the guest for that. That makes sense. Actually, one of our comments on Cheech and Chong shirt that you wore at the forum.
Cheech and Chong. I mean, it's like I'm just saying. It's just like I know a little bit off topic, but that you can never replace the original TV stoners. I mean, I know Harold Kumar tried to like take that place, but they're not funny in my opinion. Not as funny as Cheech and Chong. I mean, it's like. I mean, come on! They literally drive around in a car made out of a van made out of a wheat. I mean, you can't beat that.
Right. Can you imagine if the car got lit on fire? They'd be getting high and dying at the same time.
Dude, man, our car's on fire. What? I'm just getting really high.
Well, I forgot, like that KMPL episode, right?
It's like, oh yeah, that's the 15th time you asked for a hit this hour. What?
Oh, you know what's funny? A lot of people are talking about the Boondocks at the forum.
Yeah, because
there was actually a girl from the Black Lives Matter movement that was singing like the intro song to the Boondocks. And we were talking about that episode with the White Heaven. And I said, did you see that episode? She's like, yeah. I mean, that's the only thing I ever seen from the Boondocks. I know you've watched it, but I watched the YouTube you sent me of it. So
I can't. That was the funny. It was like President Ronald Reagan, and Ronald Reagan was his St. Peter there at the White Heaven. And then it was like,
right.
It's like now Ruckus. There's many separate but generally equal heavens for many different types of people. And then he's black, but he wanted to be white. And then he looks in the fountain, and he's turned white.
He's like, oh, I turned white.
No, I know the song that you're talking about, though. The one,
oh yeah,
the one. Let's see if I try to sing it a little bit. I'm the stone that the builder refused. And then it keeps going. I'm not gonna sing the whole song, but
yeah, she was singing something like that. Yeah.
But and you know you should.
But poetry and music is a wonderful way to express revolution. Tupac was originally like that. Tupac Shakur, you know, his family were Black Panthers. You know the NWO. You know, the anti-police brutality. You know, these are all, you know, the original rappers were, you know, all activists, and Pedro's well aware of that, and many others. You know, they're not going to be sellouts. Immortal Technique's not a sellout. You know, he's successful, but he's not going to sell out to the corporations and exposing the injustices in the world.
You know, you really should have gotten it like more in contact with Immortal Technique. Like, got his contact info.
Well, he might come down to do a concert in Tampa or St. Pete. Bruce has interviewed him and mentioned to him that he'd like him to come down and do a concert, and I could possibly get you free tickets if that happens. So we'll see, comrade. And just stay in St. Pete the next few months to see what we can do.
Well, yeah. Well, I was saying that
I heard the Wailers were coming down. You know, the guys that played alongside Marley to St. Pete. I might even get you a free ticket for that. I don't know, but it's great to be in a van full of artists and fellow activists.
But you should have gotten in contact with Immortal Technique, because you could have talked to him and told him that.
Well, I did talk to him briefly, and Bruce has his contact info, I believe. So we'll set something up. If I find out when he's coming down, you know, we might be able to shake his hand or something.
Because there was a certain somebody that we know that thinks that, you know, that he's a sellout, and we could have had Payday on.
Oh, Payday? Yeah, we can ask him about Payday. Yeah.
We could have them debate each other on air, like have an awkward
on our program? I don't know.
Hey, Al, I got to go for like 5 minutes. I'm going to be back for the very end of the show. But, yeah.
All right, I'll keep talking so the listeners will listen for the last few minutes of the show.
Okay. All right. Be back.
All right, listeners, as I was telling my fellow comrade and co-host Chris, I just came back from the U.S. Social Forum in Philly, and you know, we were mentioning early on that the lack of media coverage, therefore the importance of social media, sharing this program, sharing videos from this U.S. Social Forum, I think is essential to revolution. You know, that more and more people can be aware, so the next forum, more people show up, more marches can happen. You know, I attended 2 left forums, and it didn't come close to the experience I had here at the U.S. Social Forum. But the first left forum I went through actually was better than the last, because there was a march. And at that march, there was several Greek comrades that marched with me towards Zuccotti Park, where Occupy started in New York, and showed solidarity with Turkish comrades. And they've been fighting each other for centuries, and this was a historical move, and I was there for that. But unfortunately, in the second left forum last year, not the one this year, I couldn't attend. A lot of people couldn't attend because a lot of the Greeks were in Greece supporting their government. Syriza, they were no longer in exile. But last year there was no march, so it was interesting. Academics here or there, but the U.S. Social Forum was more radical, more street revolutionaries, as I was explaining to Chris earlier in the program. So he will be back more momentarily. We did have somebody contributed to the conversation, not somebody who called in, because unfortunately we can't have callers in this program for this episode, who is named Pedro El Poeta, and he's a local activist out of St. Pete. I'm with the Florida delegation for the Poor People's Economic Human Rights Campaign, aka PPERC. And, he contributed talking about a little bit his experience in Nicaragua and experience as a local activist and things that we went through, workshops or whatnot, from this forum that's been going on for the past few days. As a matter of fact, I was going to go back early and fly back, and I had canceled that so I could take part in the march and could travel, as we are doing now, back towards Florida with my comrades. So we're going to continue this program into 11 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, and at approximately midnight, the YouTube channel for CTY, for Voice of Rebellion Radio, will be uploading the recording of this program, which I will be sharing on Facebook. For those of you who want to add me, the co-host with Chris J, on Facebook, you can look me up on Al Suarez, Suarez, aka Alex. This has been a wonderful experience here so far, having been the U.S. Social Forum, alongside Sherry Honkala, alongside Nashante Robinson, alongside Pedro Poeta, and Reverend Bruce Wright, and several others. It's been a wonderful experience. I'm going to be writing an article I mentioned earlier soon with the People's Tribune, which will be translated to Spanish into the Tribuno del Pueblo, which will be detailing the experiences we had in Philly. It also be mentioned the case of Marty Droll, which we've talked about several times on the program, who was a comrade that passed away in mysterious circumstances in Philly last year. I was able to speak with a friend of his who just got out of jail, had been in jail the past 5.5 years, was set up by the U.S. government. Marty had gone into court 5 years ago as a character witness, and they shut the courthouse completely down because he was on a watch list. Of course, after his mysterious death, the feds denied that there was a file on him. But Marty was a guy who had a lot of enemies. He was looking into a lot of people, and ultimately he passed away. And that's not something that, as his comrade who marched with him during the RNC in Tampa, who was shown around Philly by him 2 years ago or a year and a half ago, that I'm going to let go. So, as an investigative journalist, as a fellow activist and comrade, I'm going to maintain his legacy, help his family, do anything I can to make sure that he gets justice. And that's one of the groups that Chris and I are a part of as well, is the Justice for Marty group. And it's Justice for Marty ! I'm sure a lot of you can find it. And I'll be mentioning that as well in the articles about what I think about Marty and his spirit that has stayed there in the beautiful city of, the beautiful city of Philly, where the Declaration of Independence was written. One of the beautiful things I like about Philly is that many parts of it remind me of my hometown of Boston, and one of the first American cities, of course, was essential to the first American Revolution. Benjamin Franklin himself, who was an ambassador of France and, of course, one of the founding fathers, was from Philadelphia. And I hope on my next trip to Philly to see the spot where the Declaration of Independence was signed. I wasn't able to see it this time either. So, yeah, it's been a great trip so far. It's going to take about 20 hours to get back to Florida. I'll probably be, as soon as I arrive home, passing out from a long trip. And then when I regain my strength, I will be writing articles detailing things we went through. The People's Tribune is part of the Poor People's Economic Rights Campaign, and they're very open to getting writers to write articles there, and they've been very acquainted with my writing, and I'll be happy to finally be able to publish there. And I'll be republishing that article when it comes out the next few days in Facebook as well, so that my comrades and friends there can enjoy reading it and not have to wait a few days when it's published online or or comes out in print. I was
back.
talking about the march earlier and how we marched through the rain. Oh, hey, Chris. Yeah, I was just filling our listeners in on some of my plans and the article that I'm going to write. I believe we have about 9 minutes left of the show. Go ahead and put your final details in for our listeners.
Well, when you talk about socialism in the 21st century, I think there's one example that many leftists don't want to acknowledge as socialism, but I'll say it is. And then there's the Middle Eastern aspect in countries like Syria. Let's not forget Bashar al-Assad and his father were both socialists, and the name of the party is the Ba'ath Arab Socialist Party. And this fight is a struggle between the people and a lot of them foreign terrorists, mercenaries funded by the United States government, Mossad, funded by Saudi Arabia, the Gulf states. In most of these, actually, I would say that every Syrian opposition group is terroristic, even the Free Syrian Army, because they're supposed to be some of the moderates. These people can do suicide bombings. These people crucify Christians, literally crucify Christians, eat the organs of the defeated enemies. They've literally, they've literally used chemical weapons themselves. They've
Once you've sold an American hostage to ISIS, you can't call yourself a moderate anymore. So people say, well, the moderates sold them to ISIS. We have to be accurate in what we're saying. One group of terrorists sold the American to another group of terrorists, and that group of terrorists, it's like you're only a moderate when you receive U.S. aid, right? But it's not just a question of U.S. aid, of course. ISIS was invented by the CIA. That's indisputable at this point, right? And alongside Mossad. We don't just want to blame the CIA, but, that's very obvious why. The motives behind the training, the funding, and the arming of ISIS with U.S. tax dollars. It's very obvious to topple Assad because he's one of the last anti-Zionist regimes in the Middle East. And if we look at the history of Nasser, Pan-Arabism, socialism, right? Oh, like Pan-Americanism, what happened with Chavez? Chavez obviously was a admirer of Nasser, of Egypt. You see a reemergence of the history in Latin America, but unfortunately there's still many divisions in the Middle East. We mentioned earlier Yemen. You see the height of division there. And I think essentially socialism is the only way to unite all the peoples. Like you look at Yugoslavia, right, after Tito, who was obviously a socialist, fell, it was Balkanized, right? That's why they say Balkanization was talking about division now, because the Balkans is where Yugoslavia was. So socialism ultimately is what will unite us. And we'll have a united front, maybe difference, like ideological differences, but ultimately if we're striving for that same more egalitarian, more humane society, we can accomplish the impossible. They did it in Syria, they did it in Spain, they did it in Latin America. Eventually in the United States, the discrimination of the third parties shall cease and the two other parties will diminish, and a new revolutionary party of the working class will emerge.
And I wanted to mention one last, you could also argue, not only just argue, I think it's really, back stand for themselves, is that even Iran, people like to say that it's a right-wing theocracy, but really what Ahmadinejad had done, he made sure that banks could no longer, commit usury against the people.
Well, Gaddafi did as well. Gaddafi had enemy banksters, right?
Yeah, and that's what Iran did. They kicked out the Rothschild banking system, and the banks that were left there, that gave loans to the people had limits. Like they could not, do the usury by putting interest rates that the people could not pay off. And also,
that's part of Islam, donating part of the solidarity, anti-usury, not bribery, what's the word? Gambling. That's within their religion as well, culturally.
Yeah, and also what Iran had done is that they had they have I think they were moving towards nationalizing the resources, and Iran also made education free, so they had I would argue that, and they took a strong stance against capitalism, and so if you're saying that they're if you're going to say that, they're not capitalist, I'm definitely not going to say they're fascists. That's definitely wrong. I mean, the United States sometimes makes that accusation.
Political fascism, economic capitalism is ultimately failing, and an alternative system needs to be brought. It's not just being anti-imperialist or anti-something, it's being pro-something and offering that alternative society, that ideal society that we're striving for. I'm exhausted now, comrade. Last couple minutes of the show, I will be hanging up now, and we'll be keeping in touch soon, okay?
All right. And, yeah, we only have like a few minutes left. We have like 2 minutes left before we go to the music. I mean, it's already 10:57 here. So now we are going to be going to the bumper soon. And also, I just want to, talk about is that, yeah, it's socialism in the 21st century definitely has an impact. And I think that the people in the truth movement need to look at it differently. People need to look at the fact that they are fighting the fascists in the New World Order, fighting the big corporations, and they are fighting alongside the people. These people like Hugo Chavez who have kicked out the Rothschilds, or Gaddafi, even though he was more of a he was a new socialism, but not from the 21st century. His own green socialism in the Libyan Arab Jamahiriya, I think is the right word for what Libya was, and or Bashar al-Assad, who has now came after Hafez al-Assad. Now Bashar al-Assad is a 21st century socialist in Iran. In Syria, it's a people's fight. Some people argue it's not socialist, but it is socialist, and it's also a fight of the people against, a foreign intervention, that's been done sneakily. And the United States has sent troops that are in Syria and are probably directly fighting Syrian Arab army forces in small numbers, and soon a big invasion's happening. I mean, a pro-government think tank, the Brookings Institute, said that they are that pretty much laid out the plans that they are. They said they're nearing an invasion of Syria. And that's been the plans all along, and they said they are nearing the invasion of Syria. So, just to keep in mind. But anyways, thanks for tuning in to this Divine Radio.
Sayanim, how have you been? I think we're gonna need your help again. Remember the passports from Britain, my friend? We need 20 more from Saudi and Yemen. What is coming is big and it is gonna sell. Much bigger than the King David Hotel. America's military should never say that. We are the bomb when we dress like the Arabs. You